Silence is often misunderstood. To many, it's merely the absence of sound, an awkward pause in a conversation, or a void that begs to be filled. But in the heart of a secluded Buddhist hermitage, a remarkable story unfolded that revealed silence to be much more, a profound and transformative force. In this hermitage, nestled amidst the stillness of nature, lived a revered Buddhist monk known for his deep wisdom and simple ways. Among his disciples was a particularly talkative man who had a penchant for filling every moment with words. His chatter extended far beyond the bounds of necessity, and his stories, whether true or embellished, served primarily to elevate himself in the eyes of others. He spoke of his wealthy background, his sacrifices, and his supposed superiority, often at the expense of harmony within the community. Despite the disciples' disruptive tendencies, the monk observed him with patience. He saw in the young man an opportunity for growth, a potential hidden beneath the layers of noise and self-importance. One day, the monk announced that each disciple would take a personal vow for a month to strengthen their resolve and deepen their practice. The talkative disciple, eager to distinguish himself, sought the monk's guidance. "Give me a resolution worthy of my abilities," he insisted. The monk, with a serene smile, challenged him to a task that seemed deceptively simple. Remain silent for an entire month. At first, the disciple scoffed at the suggestion. How hard could it be to keep quiet? Yet, as the days passed, he discovered that silence was far from easy. The external quietness only amplified the noise within his mind. An incessant stream of questions, complaints, and unresolved emotions. By the fourth day, he felt as though he might burst. Desperate, he wrote to the monk, pleading for guidance. "I feel as though I'm losing my mind," he confessed. The monk's response was calm yet firm. "You may break your vow if you wish, but remember, the strength to hold this resolution is the foundation for mastering life's greater challenges." These words struck a chord in the disciple. Determined to persevere, he retreated further into himself. Seeking refuge in solitude, he ventured into the forest, away from the distractions of the hermitage, hoping to quiet the storm within. In the forest's embrace, the disciple faced his thoughts head-on. The voices in his mind, which once seemed overwhelming, began to subside as he observed them with detachment. Slowly, he realized that his incessant talking had been a means of avoiding this confrontation with himself. This phase of the story unearthed a universal truth. Silence is not merely the cessation of speech, but the beginning of self-awareness. It is in the stillness that we come face to face with our true selves, stripped of pretense and distraction. As the days turned into weeks, the disciple underwent a profound transformation. The inner noise that once dominated his consciousness gave way to a sense of peace he had never known. He began to notice the subtle symphony of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, and the gentle flow of water. These sounds, though ever present, had been drowned out by the clamor of his thoughts and words. When the month concluded, the disciple returned to the hermitage, radiating a newfound tranquility. His fellow disciples, astonished by the change, surrounded him with questions. But his words, once hurried and boastful, now flowed with deliberate grace. The monk welcomed him back and asked, "Have you completed your vow?" "Yes," the disciple replied, "but I have discovered something deeper. True silence is not merely the absence of speech, but the stilling of the mind. Only when I silenced my thoughts did I find real peace." The monk nodded, his eyes filled with quiet pride. "You have learned what many fail to see, that in the silence, we uncover the truth of who we are. When we stop speaking, we begin to listen, not just to others but to the world and ourselves." This story holds a mirror to our modern lives, where noise is constant and silence is rare. From the buzz of notifications to the hum of daily chatter, we are surrounded by distractions that pull us away from our inner selves. Consider, for example, the prevalence of arguments in families, workplaces, and communities. How often do these conflicts arise from misunderstandings fueled by hasty words and an unwillingness to listen? Imagine how much suffering could be avoided if we all paused to reflect before speaking. The disciple's journey also serves as a reminder of the energy we expend through unnecessary speech. Words have power, but when overused or misused, they deplete us, leaving little room for creativity, insight, or meaningful connection. As we continue this exploration in the next section, we will delve deeper into the practical lessons from the disciples' experience. How can we, too, embrace silence in a world that values constant communication? What steps can we take to cultivate inner peace amidst the chaos? Join us in this journey as we uncover the profound wisdom of silence and its transformative potential. And if this resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to Buddhism in Modern Life. Together, we can explore the teachings that illuminate our path to a more mindful, harmonious existence. When we think of silence, we often picture an external stillness, a quiet room, a secluded forest, or the absence of conversation. But as the talkative disciple discovered, true silence is a much deeper experience. It's not simply about removing noise from the outside world. It's about confronting and calming the noise within. The disciple's journey into the forest wasn't just a retreat from the chatter of the hermitage. It was a step towards self-discovery. He began this journey burdened by the voices of his ego, his insecurities, and his unresolved emotions. These inner voices, amplified by his vow of silence, were a mirror reflecting all the chaos he had been avoiding. This second phase of the story invites us to consider our relationship with our own inner chatter. How often do we speak, not to communicate, but to drown out our thoughts? How much of what we say is driven by a need to fill the silence, to affirm our identity, or to seek validation from others? As the disciple sat alone in the forest, he found that the external silence was only the beginning. The true challenge lay in quieting the ceaseless dialogue within his mind. It was a battle, not against an enemy, but against his own deeply ingrained habits. And slowly, as he observed these thoughts without judgment, they began to lose their grip on him. This process mirrors the practice of mindfulness, a cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy. Mindfulness teaches us to observe our thoughts without becoming entangled in them. It's about creating a space between ourselves and our mental chatter, allowing us to see clearly rather than react impulsively. Imagine, for instance, a moment of frustration in your daily life. Perhaps someone cuts you off in traffic, and your mind immediately leaps into a torrent of anger, blame, and self-righteousness. In that moment, you might yell at the other driver or fume in silence, letting the emotions dictate your actions. But what if you paused, took a breath, and simply observed your thoughts? In doing so, you might notice the root of your anger, perhaps a sense of injustice, or a deeper fear of being disrespected. By observing rather than reacting, you gain the freedom to choose your response. This is the power of mindfulness, and it begins with silence. For the disciple, this practice became a way of life. Alone in the forest, he began to notice the beauty of the present moment. The rustling leaves, once background noise, became a melody of nature's rhythm. The chirping birds, the gentle breeze, and the flowing streams were no longer interruptions but invitations to connect with the world around him. This shift in perception is a reminder of the richness we miss when we're caught up in our mental chatter. In our rush to speak, to explain, to prove ourselves, we overlook the simple joys of being present. Consider the story of a young mother who once shared her struggle with finding peace amidst the demands of raising children. She described how her days were filled with constant noise, children's laughter, cries, questions, and her own instructions and corrections. She often felt overwhelmed, longing for a moment of quiet. One day, after reading about mindfulness, she decided to experiment. Instead of reacting to every sound and demand, she took a step back and simply observed. When her children argued, she watched their interaction without immediately intervening. When they played, she noticed the creativity and joy in their actions. Through this practice, she found a new kind of silence, not the absence of sound, but a presence of mind. She discovered that even in the chaos, there was a rhythm and beauty she had been too distracted to see. The disciple's journey teaches us that this kind of silence is not about isolation or escape. It's about creating a sanctuary within ourselves, where we can find clarity and peace no matter what is happening around us. This sanctuary is especially important in a world that values constant communication. Social media, for example, thrives on our need to share and respond. Every post, comment, and like becomes a statement of who we are, a way to affirm our place in the world. Yet, in the midst of this digital noise, how often do we truly listen? Listening is an art, and it begins with silence. To truly hear another person, we must set aside our own thoughts and judgments. This kind of listening creates connection and understanding, qualities that are increasingly rare in a fast-paced, opinion-driven society. Take the example of a corporate leader who transformed his team dynamics by embracing the power of silence. During meetings, he made it a point to listen more and speak less. Instead of dominating the conversation with his ideas, he invited each team member to share their thoughts. This simple act of listening not only improved morale, but also led to more innovative solutions, as team members felt valued and heard. The disciple's transformation wasn't just about finding peace for himself. When he returned to the hermitage, his newfound silence became a gift to others. His words, once boastful and hurried, were now measured and meaningful. His presence radiated calm, inspiring those around him to reflect on their own habits. This brings us to a profound insight. Silence is not just a personal practice. It's a way of being that influences the world around us. When we speak less and listen more, we create spaces where understanding and compassion can flourish. As the Buddhist monk explained to the disciple, much of the world's suffering stems from our inability to remain silent. Wars are fought, relationships are broken, and opportunities are lost because we speak without thinking. Yet, when we embrace silence, we conserve our energy and gain the clarity needed to act wisely. Imagine the ripple effect if more people practiced this kind of mindful silence. Families would have fewer arguments, workplaces would see greater collaboration, and communities would grow stronger. As we conclude this second part of the journey, let's pause to reflect on our own relationship with silence. How often do we speak out of habit rather than necessity? How much energy do we expend on words that add little value? If you're inspired to explore these questions further, consider joining our community at Buddhism in Modern Life. Subscribe to our channel for more stories and insights that illuminate the path to inner peace and mindful living. In the final part, we will delve into the disciple's ultimate realization and the lessons it holds for all of us. Stay with us as we uncover the deeper truths of silence and its transformative power. The disciple's journey into silence had been transformative. After weeks of solitude in the forest, he returned to the hermitage a changed man. His heart was lighter, his mind clearer, and his words fewer, but they carried a depth that was palpable. The other monks noticed the shift in him. He no longer dominated conversations with boastful anecdotes or needless opinions. Instead, when he spoke, his words were thoughtful and deliberate, like ripples in a still pond. But his master, the wise monk, could see there was one final lesson the disciple needed to understand. One evening, after a communal meditation session, the master called the disciple to his side. "You've learned much about silence," the master said, "but tell me, what is the true purpose of silence?" The disciple paused, reflecting deeply before he answered. "Silence has helped me listen better, both to others and to myself. It has brought me peace and clarity." The master nodded, his gaze unwavering. These are valuable fruits of silence. But there is one greater purpose. Silence is the soil in which wisdom grows. It is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of understanding. The disciple, though humbled by his experiences, felt a tinge of doubt. "Master," he said hesitantly, "how can silence lead to wisdom? Doesn't wisdom come from study, teaching, and experience?" The master smiled gently. "Come with me." He led the disciple to a quiet stream that ran along the edge of the hermitage. The moonlight shimmered on the water's surface, creating a scene of serene beauty. The master gestured toward the stream. "Look at the water," he said. "What do you see?" "I see the moon's reflection," the disciple replied. "Now disturb the water," the master instructed. The disciple hesitated, but then dipped his hand into the stream. creating ripples that distorted the reflection of the moon. "And now," asked the master, "the reflection is broken," the disciple admitted. The master crouched beside him. "This is the mind when it is filled with noise, disturbed, restless, and unable to see clearly. Wisdom lies in clarity, and clarity comes from stillness. When the water is still, it reflects the truth. When the mind is still, it perceives truth as well." In that moment, the disciple understood. Silence was not an escape or a shield. It was a state of openness where the mind could connect with the deeper truths of life. It was in silence that wisdom revealed itself, not through force, but through the gentle unfolding of understanding. Silence in practice. This realization was the culmination of the disciple's journey, and it holds a profound lesson for all of us. In our modern lives, wisdom is often mistaken for knowledge, facts, figures, and clever arguments. But true wisdom arises from the ability to discern what matters, to see beyond appearances, and to act with compassion and insight. Silence, then, is not just a tool for inner peace. It is the foundation of a wise and meaningful life. It teaches us to 1. Discern what matters. In the noise of daily life, it's easy to get caught up in trivialities. Silence helps us step back, prioritize, and focus on what truly matters. 2. See beyond appearances. When we quiet our judgments and assumptions, we can see people and situations for what they truly are. This clarity allows us to respond, rather than react. 3. Act with compassion. Silence fosters empathy. By listening deeply to others, we understand their struggles and joys, making it easier to act with kindness and understanding. The ripple effect of silence. When the disciple returned to his daily routines, he noticed something remarkable. His practice of silence didn't just transform him, it began to influence those around him. Fellow monks, inspired by his calm presence, started to speak less and listen more. Conflicts within the hermitage diminished, and the sense of community deepened. This ripple effect reminds us that silence is not a solitary practice. Just as one still pond can reflect the moon, one quiet mind can inspire others to find their own stillness. Think of the power this could have in our lives. In families, silence can prevent arguments from escalating, creating space for understanding. In workplaces, it can foster creativity and collaboration. In communities, it can build bridges of empathy and trust. Returning to the world. The disciple's story ends not with him retreating permanently into solitude, but with him returning to the world, carrying his silence within him. He had learned that silence was not confined to the forest or the hermitage. It was a way of being that he could carry into every interaction and experience. And so, the disciple's vow of silence became a lifelong practice, not of muteness, but of mindfulness. He spoke when it was necessary, listened when it mattered, and remained silent when words would only add to the noise. As you finish this story, consider this. How can you bring more silence into your own life? It might begin with a small practice, turning off distractions for a few minutes each day, pausing before you speak, or simply sitting in stillness and observing your thoughts. Start small, and notice the changes. You might find, as the disciple did, that silence is not a void but a space for peace, clarity, and wisdom to grow. If this story has resonated with you, join our community at Buddhism in Modern Life by subscribing to our channel. Together, let's explore the timeless teachings that help us navigate the complexities of modern existence with grace and insight. Thank you for journeying with us through this exploration of silence. May your path be filled with peace and understanding.